What's happening, everybody? Hope everyone had a lovely Memorial Day weekend. I took Monday off, and as I told you guys, there would just be days where we're doing 4 shows a week during the dead of the off season, and May and June are truly the dead zone. July, we got free agency. There's stuff to talk about then. We'll probably go back to pretty much exclusively 5 shows a week. And then August, when leagues open again, that's when we ramp it up to about 10 shows a week. And that is how we do it basically until like the end of March. Good God, I should rest while I can. Welcome to Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. I am Dan Vespris, and today we are looking back at a show from before the season. Again, it's our first and second round pairing guide. Let's see how the pairs worked. And with the caveat, of course, that if the first round pick didn't pan out, then there's not really much in the way of pairing that's going to fix it. But this was the first time I had done this type of show, and I think there were some tweaks I probably could make when we do another one this year, and we'll do a few when the boards shuffle for Yahoo, because this is always a thing people want. They want to know who to put with their first round pick. And anyway, let's start looking through them and see what happened. So this was the version 2 Yahoo rank board, which is the one basically for the entirety of the month of September. This is for head-to-head leagues. For roto leagues, you're covering up deficiencies typically. With head-to-head, you are leaning into strengths. That's the big difference. Not that you're like hard punting after 2 rounds, but you want to build a particular type of team, and your first 2 picks are the guys that are going to have the largest influence on what your team is going to be. Again, this is not my rank board. This is the way Yahoo had them ranked out of the chute. So Yahoo had Victor Wembanyama number 1. You guys know me. I had Nikola Jokic number 1. Doesn't matter. We're going on the Yahoo PreRank board. The best pair for Wemby as of preseason was LaMelo Ball, and the thought process there was that because Wembanyama is not a superior field goal percent center, he's a center who gets a ton of block shots and a ton of rebounds and hits threes, which is an out-of-position stat. He'll get you a handful of assists. Not a massive number, but a pretty good number for a center, and probably a decent foul shooting. We didn't know exactly where he would be with that, but was not strong in field goal percent. You probably should have built a punt field goal team around Wemby, because you weren't going to need that many other centers to cover up or to build on top of the rebounds and the blocks. You're going to need your normal amount, but you can target a center that shoots the free throws well, that rebounds well, because again, blocks are in a lot of good shape. But if you are building a punt field goal team on Victor Wembanyama's shoulders, you got to make sure you get the guard stats that go with it, and those guys dry up pretty quick. So LaMelo, had he stayed healthy, would have been a pretty good pairing there, because you could also probably semi-punt turnovers if you wanted to. Obviously, Ball didn't stay healthy, so it didn't work out all that well. Backup options were Damian Lillard or Chet Holmgren if you wanted to lean into the all-big man build. Not really my super fan move there on Chet, but Dame would have been a really good one until late in the year, because, again, you get a similar statistical makeup to LaMelo Ball. Not as many steals, but really good foul shooting numbers. You got the threes, you got the scoring, you got some assists, not a copious number of them. This is a hard one to say whether it would have worked or not, because again, like LaMelo didn't stay healthy and Wemby didn't stay healthy. But the best we can do is look at it and say, yeah, I mean, if this guy had stayed upright, this probably would have worked. BetOnline, friends, is the world's #1 source for all sports betting action and the most trusted betting platform on earth. Baseball in full swing. You got the NBA playoffs still cooking, conference finals. NHL playoffs are happening. I couldn't possibly tell you what's going on in them right now, because there's an old joke where the punchline is, what the do I know about hockey? That's me. But over at BetOnline, you can get the latest odds, news, scores, staying in on the action, including live in-game betting while the games are actually being played, which is pretty freaking cool. You could get in on the Wolves Thunder from last night. You can get down on Pacers Knicks when that game, and you don't even have to buy in on it before the ball game begins. Plus, You got a live casino. You got a non-live casino option over at Bet Online if you don't want to deal with waiting for the sporting events to go. So you can play blackjack with other people. You can play blackjack against basically an AI because the dealer has to do the same thing. You've got 48 different slot games you can play from. You've got these exclusive games. You got sports slot games. You've got table games. You want baccarat? Have at it. European roulette, Pai Gow. They've got all of them. They've got all of them over at Bet Online. So check them out today. Bet Online. The game starts here. Next name on the board, Nikola Jokic at number 2. And the best pair was anyone. Anyone. Backup option was anyone. I only had one player on the avoid list for Jokic, and that was Chet Holmgren, who I thought would be a super weird pairing to take a shot blocking center as a backup to Nikola Jokic, where the only thing that you're not super strong at after the first round is basically shot blocking. And on the head-to-head side, that means just build into any 6 to 7 strengths for Jokic, but don't waste a pick trying to shore up the only thing he's not that great at. Roto side, I mean, you could make a case for it, but you're going to want to make sure that you get some guards there anyway. So, I mean, this one was obviously an easy one. Jokic was monster, and you could pair him with anybody. Luka is a little bit similar in that the backup option was anyone, and the avoid, again, was Chet Holmgren for a slightly different reason. Not that you had to punt blocks with Luka. You're probably looking at either a punt free throw team, a punt turnover team would also make sense with Luka. Now, again, missing 30 games, it's hard to say whether any of this would work. But I felt like the best pair to go with Luka Doncic was actually James Harden, because he wasn't going to score a ton this year, where you knew Luka was 28 points a game, but you were going to lean into the strengths of guards who can rebound. And that would allow you to sort of kick the can down the road a little bit on what you wanted to do next. Does this force you into a punt of field goal instead of free throw? That's a possibility. You might end up looking down that path. You might end up punting blocks, or you might not, because Harden is usually a half a block or more per year. Luka's around a half block. Both those guys get good steals, boards, assists, threes. Terrible turnover team. You are definitely punting turnovers with those two guys. Harden can fix Luka's free throw stuff. Not that you're going to dominate that category, but you can kind of go a number of different ways. But the thing is, like with Luka, you can almost do anything with your next pick. His field goal percent was much lower this year, so that probably lent itself to more of a punt field goal team if you went with someone like a James Harden with your second round pick, if he was still there that far down the board. But again, the story with Luka is that you can go most directions, and that's what makes him such an easy first rounder to lean into had he stayed healthy. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was Yahoo's number 4 player at this point. Interestingly, I have Harden as the best pair for Shai as well, and I feel like that might have been a misprint. I honestly can't figure out why that was the name I put there, other than to say, look, again, you're starting your team with 2 guards that can rebound. Shai's 5 rebounds a game. Harden was 6 rebounds a game. Harden gets you assists, which cover up Shai's only guard issue. You're going to have a monster of a foul shooting team. You're going to score well. You're going to hit a lot of 3-pointers now. Harden also kind of covering up that. So this was almost felt like Harden was more of a roto second round pick to go with Shai. I don't fully agree with this decision on the head-to-head side. But again, the thing is with SGA, you can go so many different directions here. The only thing he's not great at is 3-point shooting. Just 2 threes a game out of a guard spot is relatively low by all accounts, and very low for first round picks, where guards and forwards, frankly, in the first round are pretty much all at 3-pointers or higher. So why? I don't really know why my second round pick here, that one doesn't make any sense to me. Looking back, I don't really understand my logic here. The backup options make more sense, which is Scotty Barnes and Devin Booker. Now, I didn't really want Scotty Barnes this year, so Booker was really the guy I was looking at as the SGA pair, because he's also not much of a 3-point shooter. He's a good percentages guy, so you don't sacrifice much of that. You do get a 7 assist dude out of Devin. You get scoring. Doesn't rebound a ton, but that's okay because you can shore that up with a big man. And at some point here later on, third round, fourth round, or both, you take a big man and you decide whether or not you want to attack blocks. Because Shay's a pretty good shot blocking guard. He averages one a game. You're going to get good steals out of Shay. You have this really nice foundation of scoring and percentages on relatively low turnovers. Your assists are fine. Your rebounds are fine. You don't have to punt anything, but if you do, threes is probably the next thing. So you can look at a big man in the third and fourth round, and they don't have to make 3-pointers. You can look at a more traditional big. And as long as they're an okay foul shooter, you don't give up much of your advantage there. So that one probably made a little bit more sense. You could also look at someone, like a Jimmy Butler a little bit later on, a DeMar DeRozan a little bit later on. Those are guys you'd take after collecting a big man. Giannis was the number 5 player on Yahoo at this point. This was pretty straightforward. The best pair for Giannis was LeBron James. De'Aaron Fox was someone that kind of crept up the board, not on this iteration of the Yahoo board, but on the next one. Domantas Sabonis, also a reasonable pair. If you liked Scotty Barnes, he would have been also a decent backup to a backup option there. But I didn't like Scotty Barnes, so that one was more of a like, if you must. LeBron and Sabonis. And again, later on, De'Aaron Fox were the sort of 3 guys. Now, that said, Fox got better at foul shooting this year. His other stuff tapered off, but he shot 83% at the free throw line. That was interesting. LeBron was still at 78%, which wasn't terrible, but you're just like, you're not spending capital on something that's not going to help your team. You're covering up one of Giannis's issues, which I guess would be 3-pointers if you go the LeBron direction. You make sure you don't have to punt both free throws and threes. But Giannis gets you a huge chunk of points, boards, assists, steals, blocks, field goal percent. So you just figure out like, okay, well, he's bad at free throws, absolutely awful. So I should probably punt those. He's bad at 3-pointers, but you almost treat it a little bit like a big man at that point, even if he has multiple position eligibility. And you're like, okay, well, here's where I lean here. I'm going to pick somebody up that isn't like, they don't have to be the worst at foul shooting, but you don't care. That's what allows you to spend capital on other stuff. So LeBron, who's again not a bad free throw shooter, shot 78% at the line this year, but it's not helping you. But you're not worried about it. It's just a deficiency that you're like, yeah, I don't care. So you get 8 assists a game out of Braun. He hits over 2 3-pointers a game. He starts to cover that up a little bit. You get another points, rebounds, assists, steals bump. And it's a simple decision. With Sabonis, you're not getting the defensive stats, but you're getting a huge chunk of rebounds and assists out of the center spot, which is going to make it easier for you to collect guards later on. And there's a lot of them down the board. The only issue I have with going Sabonis as the second pick, which again, he's a good pair with Giannis, is you can get center stats like a million different places later on in a draft from punt, free throw, big men. The only thing you don't get out of those is you're not going to get assists out of your center. So you have to make sure that whatever guards you get, they do get you some assists. You want to make sure that your forwards get you assists as well, because you don't want to punt 2, 3 different things right out of the chute. Giannis, to me, like, I get it. The punt free throw build is an alluring one, but I think it's a pretty hard way to start a draft. Tyrese Halliburton at 6. And this one actually makes the most sense with James Harden as the best pair. So again, I don't know why I had Harden in there with Luka. That one didn't make any sense to me. Harden with Halliburton makes all the sense in the universe. Now, Halliburton's not a bad field goal guy, but he is a bad scoring player. And that's the real key with Halliburton, is if you took him in the middle of the first round, in head-to-head, you were probably punting points, because you're starting way behind everybody else in that category. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 points back. So you're talking about like a mid-round kind of guy. That's just very hard to make up when the other teams are not picking low-scoring dudes, and you don't even have one of your low-scoring centers. Invariably, eventually, all of us end up with some center on our team that averages 12 points a game. You just sort of can't have Halliburton as your number one guy and those other dudes and expect to win scoring. So, why not look at someone like a James Harden, who we knew was not going to be blowing the roof off the building and scoring in the second round, but was going to be good at all these other things that Halliburton was already good at. So you lean into 3-pointers. Now you have 6 threes a game out of your first two guys. You cover up Halliburton's poor rebounding with a guard who does get rebounds and kind of gets you back into the mix in that. No one's toppling you in assists with those two guys at the top. You're going to have good steals. You're actually going to have okay blocks out of your two guards. So you're not off the board in there. You probably won't be winning field goal percent either on top of points. But again, hard to know because at some point down the board here, you're going to take a high field goal percent, low scoring big man. And so you might be marginally competitive in that. What you don't want to do is ruin your free throw percent. So when you target a big man later, you're probably not going to target one of the ones who can't make a foul shot. So you're looking at somebody like a Jared Allen. Someone in the Jared Allen corridor actually makes a lot of sense. If you don't want to worry about field goal percent, you'd rather attack blocks, you could look at a Miles Turner. He's a name that pops up in the Jared Allen corridor among a bunch of other centers. So those two guys make a lot of sense as sort of leaning into the strengths. Your backup option is, again, kind of anybody. Halliburton's pretty good at a bunch of different stuff. He doesn't have a massive hole in his game other than, you would argue, points. So you don't, again, and you guys know I love to kind of kick the can down the road with this stuff. So that's a little bit of what he is. The avoid name I had was Jalen Brunson, mostly because I didn't think Jalen Brunson belonged in the second round, but also because his greatest strength was just scoring a bunch. More of a roto decision, but again, a guy I didn't want anyway. Anthony Davis at 7. Your best pair was Kevin Durant. Your backup best pairs were Donovan Mitchell and Devin Booker. Your avoid name was Kyrie Irving. The thought process there was that AD lends himself to either a punt threes or punt assists build. Those are probably the two easiest ones to do. So Kevin Durant, more of a punt assists kind of guy, gets you the defensive stats like Anthony Davis, gets you a smattering of a bunch of stuff, continues to get you scoring. Those two guys work pretty well together in a lot of different ways. The backup options that we talked about, Donovan Mitchell and Devin Booker, not as strong, obviously, in field goal percent because they're guards. But again, not well, Booker's not terrible in assists. He was a little bit better there than I think I expected at over 7 a game. I thought he'd be in the 6s. But Donovan Mitchell only at 5 assists a game. His strengths were lying more in the scoring, threes, steals department. Not as good at free throws as Booker, and frankly, worse than expected this year. I think Donovan just had a little bit of a down year. The hope there was that these would be guards that wouldn't blow up your percentages, could help free throws so that Anthony Davis wasn't too much of a drag there, help in 3-pointers and scoring. And then, like with Donovan Mitchell in particular, you're probably going to end up punting assists with that play as well. The avoid on Kyrie Irving was just because you don't want two guys who are extraordinarily injury prone. Not as injury prone as this guy. Joel Embiid was number 8 on the Yahoo board at this point. The best pair, if you got stuck with Embiid at 8, was anyone durable. So if you avoid Kyrie Irving in the second round, LeBron, who's 40, he ended up playing in most of their games anyway. Donovan Mitchell, who had historically been a little bit more beat up, although he actually did a pretty good job of lasting. Obviously, someone like LaMelo Ball shouldn't have been on the board there in the second round. The one thing that you certainly could not do with Joel Embiid was take any more chances, and it probably doesn't matter anyway because he played so little that, like, who cares if you took a chance? You were cooked to begin with. Jayson Tatum went at number 9 on this early Yahoo board, and he won't be going at 9 this coming season because he's out for the year. Kevin Durant is your best pair. Jayson Tatum could be treated a little bit like an Anthony Davis starting point in that, no, you're not getting the same defensive stats, not by a long shot. Tatum 1.2 steals, 0.6 blocks, but you're probably looking at a sort of similar wingy build where you want to be competitive in field goal percent. You want to probably win free throw percent. You want to win scoring as often as you can. Your threes need to be decent, and Kevin Durant's good enough there. Your rebounds are going to be pretty good if you get I mean, these two guys are going to combine for 15 rebounds a game, and you haven't picked up a center yet, but you're probably not going to be hard charging in assists. Tatum is fine in assists. He was up near 6 a game this year, which is actually relatively high by all accounts. But again, he's not that big. If you're getting 4 or 5 out of a center, that actually is more impactful than 5 or 6 out of a wing. But again, like, he's relatively well-rounded. So the Kevin Durant call is, again, just kind of kick the can down the road. Same with Donovan Mitchell and Devin Booker. You're just kicking the can. And the player I thought you should avoid with Tatum would have been Domantas Sabonis, because now you're way behind in blocks. You're not in particularly good shape in steals. Your assists are now better and rebounds are better, but scoring takes a hit and threes take a hit. And now you've got one down field goal and one up, and one down free throw and one up. This is more of a roto play. So again, remember, this is a head-to-head discussion. That some of the guys in the avoid board, like this one in particular, if you went Tatum in the first round in roto, Sabonis made a lot of sense as your second round pick, because now you were okay in literally everything except blocks. You weren't very good. So you've managed to turn your team into like an 8-cat competitive creature. But in head to head, you don't want to be competitive in 8 cats. You want to be really, 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 really good in like 6. Okay. Number 10 on the board was Steph Curry. And this is another one where you had a few different directions you could go with it. I'm not sure that, looking back, I agree with what I said um, back in September, where I had the best pair listed as James Harden and the backups as Donovan Mitchell, Kevin Durant, and Devin Booker. I think I would probably move those names around in priority, because Steph is not a big assists guy. He was someone that we had looked at as a possible punt assist or punt steals guard play if you were building that head-to-head team out of the chute. Now, he was relatively healthy this year, and he rocketed up the boards during the second half of the season when Jimmy Butler came around and took a little bit of the burden off of him. But you knew you were going to get a decent start in points, not massive, but decent. Great start in three-pointers. I mean, rebounds are whatever. Like, he's a guard. You can make that up later. But only 6 assists out of your starting point guard is relatively low. Steals had been on the decline for Steph. Actually came back up to 1.1 this year, which was certainly an upswing. Field goal percent is always sort of fine to decent for a guard. And then the free throw is going to be very, very good as per usual. So if you're looking at this from the head-to-head perspective, you're saying, okay, well, what am I weak at here? Well, rebounds, obviously, but I don't have he's a guard, so I don't care. Assists at 6 seems fine, but out of a first round guard pick, that's actually like 50% lower than the guys that are going around him. Guys like a Halliburton, Trey Young obviously was going somewhere in there. Nikola Jokic, who's a center, is getting more than that. And if you want to look at someone like a Harden in the second round, he was going to be probably up around, we figured, 9 or 10 assists this season as well. So the thought process is, okay, do I go punt assist with a 6 start? I mean, okay, you can make up for it if you want to. Probably looking at a punt steals possibility, but not necessarily locked in. So with Harden, I don't really understand my own thought process here. I could go back and I could watch the show if I want, but you're getting a lower scoring guard and you're getting good rebounds out of him. You're going to get the big assists. So now you're leaning into the assist build. Uh, I don't know. This one doesn't really track for me. The other names make more sense, where, Kevin Durant is kind of a punt assist wing play. Not that he's, again, bad at assists for who he is. He's Kevin Durant, and he's quite solid. But only 4.2 assists per game out of your small forward, power forward. That's not very much, but he's going to get you scoring. Rebounding is okay. Defensive stats are pretty decent. Percentages are pretty good. So you've got a team that's actually built around being decent at least both of those. Devin Booker is kind of the same story, where the assists are better than expected, but you don't have to build around those. But you're probably punting steals with that team. So that's why the Booker one was on the board. And then Donovan Mitchell, who's better at steals, but lower field goal percent, not a big assist guy at just 4.9. That's why those names made a little bit more sense. I don't really understand the Harden thing. I feel like I was just sort of enamored with the fact that you could get Harden in the middle to the late of this part of the second round, and that actually would have turned out to be a good pick almost no matter who you were pairing him with. But In terms of pairing him with Steph, this one doesn't really make sense to me, and I don't know why I said it. Trey Young was number 11 on the board here. This one, finally, again, just like with Halliburton, the Harden pair makes total sense here. This was an easy one because you're taking a assist specialist who's a train wreck in field goal percent and turnovers, and you pair him up with an assist specialist who's a train wreck in field goal percent and turnovers. It's a double punt without question, but you kind of have to do that in head to head when you have a pick down near the bottom of the first round if you want to catch up with the big boys. Harden covers up Trey Young's issues with steals. Usually Trey's not getting, he was at 1.2 this year, but you can't expect him to be well over one. Those guys are creating a big bubble in free throw percent. You don't have to worry about. Assists are set. Your scoring is not as good as would have expected. I think we all thought Trey Young was going to be more like 26, 27 points per game this year, but he was only at 24. But you're good with threes. Your rebounds are a little hit or miss. Blocks are probably going to be a punt. You're leaning a little bit into kind of like a punt bigs build, but you do need some bigs. So look at someone, a big man who scores and hits threes is kind of the way you're looking. Someone like a Miles Turner or Jaren Jackson Jr. gives you a bump in blocks, gives you a bump in steals. You don't necessarily have to punt those categories, but you probably don't want the traditional big man. I don't know. I mean, I guess you could go Bam Adebayo because he's a good steals, low blocks big dude if you wanted to. I still think your advantage there is to look for a big man who, you don't need. I don't think you need Bam's 4 assists with the start you have. You could focus more on a big man who hits threes and blocks shots to cover up one of your weaknesses because you don't really want to punt field goal, turnover, rebounds, and blocks. You kind of want to cover up at least one of those 4 things. And so, Bam's not good enough in rebounds to cover up that one. He's not good enough in field goal percent to cover up that. And he's not good enough in blocks. Whereas, someone like a Miles Turner or a JJJ, you're getting 1.5 to 2 blocks a game, maybe even a little more on a good year out of these dudes. Yeah, your field goal percent is still clunky. And JJJ doesn't rebound all that much. At least Miles Turner's at 6.5, Jaren Jackson at 5.5. But your threes stay good. Jaren Jackson's over 20 points per game out of the big man spot. Miles Turner is only at 16, so that's not quite as useful there. But that's probably the direction that you go from that point forward. And finally, at number 12, I can't remember if we looked at some of the other players around the turn. So Anthony Edwards was the pre-rank at 12, and I just said don't do it on the head-to-head side because I didn't feel like he was a predictable build guy. Now, as it turns out, Anthony Edwards ended up creating a set of intense positives by scoring 27 points per game and hitting 4 3-pointers a game, but that would have been really hard to handicap. So coming into this year, Anthony Edwards kind of looked like a poor man's Kevin Durant, or a poor man's Jayson Tatum, where you're getting some of the stuff that those guys are good at, but not all of it. Now, to Ant's credit, he became more of a head-to-head type of player by getting up to 4 3-pointers a game. So you could say, okay, well, now I can, if I'm going to build around Anthony Edwards, I can probably just punt assists. That's certainly the weakest category. If you're starting at 4.7 in that one, the rest of the stuff you could kind of deal with. But coming into this year, it didn't look like he was going to have that one, we call it like the one powerhouse set of categories. So what I suggested was if you ended up with the 12th pick in your draft, you don't have to go Anthony Edwards. You could have gone James Harden, who has the, again, very polarizing fantasy stat set. Some things that are very, very good, some things that are really bad. You could go Domantas Sabonis, who has some very good and some very bad. With head-to-head, that to me was a safer direction to go. As it turns out, again, now we know more about what Ant's next step in evolution was, which was to jack up a ton of 3-pointers. Great. Next year, Ant and Steph Curry are like nearly interchangeable pieces where one of them is going to be a much more reliable steals and blocks guy, which oddly enough, like Ant only had a very small edge on Steph this year. And the other one's going to be a much better free throw shooter, which is Steph. So do you want to have the free throw build where you're probably punting assists, or do you want to have the more scoring, slightly more advantageous rebounding build, durability build. So I think looking forward, it was probably needlessly cruel for me to say that Ant at 12 makes no sense. It was, in my opinion, a more difficult starting point in head to head because you didn't really know what you were going to get. Um, and now, because of the durability side, Anthony Edwards actually, like, he's someone that's going to be going in the first round much more reliably. Not necessarily because I think people feel like he's going to be a per game first rounder. I don't know where the hell his next thing is going to be next year. Maybe the field goal percent goes up by 1, or legitimately, I have no idea what the next thing is that gets better for him. But if you're going to take a guy who you feel very confident is going to get you to 75 games, that's a huge, huge weapon these days. Because look at the first round guys, look at the top 20 guys on a per game basis this season, and look how many games they played. Number 2 was Wemby. He played 46 games. Anthony Davis, 50 something at number 4. Luka Doncic, 50 something at number 6. Tatum's gone. Maxey played 50 games. Lillard played 60. KD played 60. Kyrie played 50. Kawhi played 40 something. Jalen Johnson played 30 something. And on and on and on we go with all the durability issues in the top 20. So just getting a guy who plays might be your best first and second round pairing, which is kind of what we've been talking about this whole offseason so far. Basically, is it better to just try to get somebody who's going to be out there on a night to night basis and worry about all the other stuff later anyway? I'm kind of leaning that direction. Screwy ass league. All right, so that's how the pairings looked. I don't understand a few of the Harden ones looking back. That one, like, what was I thinking? You can't pair him with everybody. He was just such a great value in the second round that I sort of swooned over him and dropped him into 2 or 3 spots where he didn't belong. There were a few there where he did. And obviously, if your first round pick was a tank, then it's hard to say whether or not the pairing worked. But we'll do stuff like this again as we look towards next season here on Old Man Squad as well. Like, rate, and subscribe on the way out. We done for today's not Monday. Today's Tuesday. I always get screwed up with the holiday. When you have kids, you go back to the, like, not knowing what day it is when there's a holiday day off. I forgot what this was like as a grown-up, because as a kid, you're just like, oh, Monday was off. But you go to school to start the week and you just think it's Monday. But as an adult, like, I've never worked in a normal Monday through Friday 9 to 5 job. When I worked in minor league baseball as a broadcaster, I worked literally every single day, even on days off for the team, which was often like a Tuesday. I had a bunch of emails to answer. I had a bunch of sales calls to make and media relations stuff to do. So I never had a day off. Now I'm in fantasy sports where I never have a day off unless I create one. And so I took yesterday off. This is Memorial Day. Nobody's listening to shows anyway. And now I don't know what day it is. Figured it out, though. It's Tuesday. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you guys tomorrow. I'm Dan.